So welcome back to Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast. My name is Julian Guderlei, and I'm here today with Rico Paganini, who is an author of acclaimed books like Gaia Legacy, Giza Legacy, and Day Legacy. Welcome to the show, Rico.
Hi, Julian, and hi, everybody out there. Best wishes from the snowy mountains of Switzerland.
Nice. It's great to be connected to Switzerland and the beautiful Europe. Rico, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. We are going to talk about consciousness and kind of what is really happening in our time right now, as it is 2018 turning into 2019. I would love to start with your work. Beyond your books, you have founded something called Evolve Forum. There's a legacy that you've kind of put into words. And I would just love to start right there with the question, who are we? And what is who are we? Who are we?
Who are we? We are eternal beings from the deity creation with enormous potential that we not really use.
Enormous potential that we're yet to be using. Interesting. So when you say we're divine beings or beings from divine origin, so where do we come from?
If we also compare what the four main religions say, and all the shamanistic religions, they have some parts in common. And one of them is that we are beings that were arrived from the so-called heaven or so-called spiritual world, that we make experiences going on our path through the material worlds, and that we are able to go back where we come from when we reach a certain kind of consciousness. So when you say, where do we come from, I would say from the spiritual worlds.
So we come from a spiritual or spirit origin, in your words, and we're kind of incarnated on planet Earth. So as a concept, so why are we here if we're on planet Earth, coming from spirit? Why are we here, and where are we going?
So first, for a long time, there was existing like this spiritual world. And then was created also the material worlds. And let's say it in an easy way, a lot of beings never left the spiritual world. Some beings left it in the early times, and some beings were crossing over in the later periods. But finally, the material worlds are, it's like created on the same matrix as the spiritual world. And we are also say that easily, we are making experiences. And we ourselves, by our deity matrix, are deciding where we give our energy, what is in resonance with us, which experience we want to make, because this is also based on the free will.
Interesting. So tell us more about this role of free will, maybe, if you can.
Mm-hmm. We have like let's say 3 deity gifts. The one is our eternal spark or eternal flame. The second is our soul, our internal soul. And the third is the free will. These are the 3 big gifts, which finally also, in the old writings, they call it a monade, or in German, eine Monade, which is this trinity of the divine spark, the eternal soul, and the free will. So this trinity is like on his own individual way of experiences. And each individual do it in another way, but there are some main lines that are usable for all beings.
Interesting. So you talk about this consciousness and this potential and these gifts basically from the spirit world. So first, I think it's quite important to really bring this to our awareness in this moment, that as we're born as humans, there is this forgetting or this process of disconnecting from this potential.
Mm-hmm.
But then how do we awaken our consciousness and our potential?
That's what you mean is a so-called great forgetness. Because let's say if we see our earth life, let's say 60 or 70 years, and every day we make our experience, then we go to sleep, and the next day we get up and we start normally with similar thoughts or feelings that we go to bed, we start again the next day. And if we see this like from a soul life, every day would be like an incarnation. And we don't often have the remembering like consciously, but in our underconsciousness. And as more conscious we get about our deity matrix and about our ego feeling, our spirit, our body, as more as we recognize ourselves and our potential and raise our consciousness, as more we remember what is like in our soul. Because our soul finally is like a summary of all the experiences we ever made. So in our soul, all our experiences from all the incarnation are like on a big, like in a kind of hard disk. And as more conscious we get, as more these informations are again accessible. So we lose nothing finally, even if we don't remember. And usually it's a certain event or an experience that we make or a turning point in our life which brings this back to us, that we think about what's the meaning of life, and not just running in our system for the job and for the entertainment. So as soon as people usually kind of wake up and ask themselves what's their meaning of life and that what they really want to, there usually starts this awakening of all the what's still slumbering in our souls.
So for those people listening that are already on a journey of awakening, or who are listening to this and are like, oh wow, this is all very new information, what are practices that kind of accelerate this awakening or these insights? I know that you've created 7 holistic steps, and I know that there's a whole like library of work that you've created that can be found at evolve-forum.ch. I'll also link that in the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe from your own experience, Rico, because I think this is very important to say, like, this is not something that is a theory. This is all based on personal experience as well. How do we open our consciousness more and more and more to remember, to be in our potential, but then also to be in our potential that kind of fits into this current world we live in?
Mm-hmm. The first is, I guess, for everyone to create like quiet spots, quiet moments in their daily life. Because if we don't go in a certain silence and try to turn up all the influences around us, it's difficult to get in a reflection. So this would be, I guess, the first. And then, there is no need for new sensations. It's the kind of praying, meditating. It's about hearing music or doing a ritual. So there are many forms, and each one can explore what's the best way. And this helps to calm down the mind, because the mind usually, it's like covering a little our other 6 parts, because we have like 6 aspects in ourselves. These are the ego, the mind, and the feelings, and the spirit, the body, and the soul. And I call them sometimes like 6 wild horses, that each one wants to run in another direction, and we have to bring like kind of a harmony or a balancing in this, so that they finally run in the same direction, where we really want that our life and our human experience is going. But for this, it's also very urgent, from my experience, that we have a basic information about who we are, where do we come from, and where we go. Because if we don't have like these 3 rough overall views, it's difficult to orientate ourselves on what is reachable and what not. So the first part we talked about should be like embedded in a kind of actual overview in which time we are living and what possibilities we have. And if we bring like these 3 parts together, it's so wonderful what's going on, and to go in our own experience, on our own path. And from my point of view, it's the biggest adventure that the human can do.
Exciting. So that big adventure, I think, for people who are tuned into this episode, is something that's a very individual experience, while we're also all really connected as a big collective over it. So what I'm curious about, Rico, is it seems to be so contrary to this everyday reality that so many people live. And I think this is also what you designed these 7 steps for, to expand our views and to create new possibilities, even if that might mean that old possibilities and old ways of being gradually fall away. Do you want to walk us through those 7 steps?
Yes, and maybe you allow me, could be helpful if we first talk shortly about the time of turning, because the 7 steps are really
absolutely
on this time of turning.
Absolutely. Let's talk more about time of turning, and yeah, the time that is now, the time that I think we all came to this planet for, to experience and to expand our awareness as individuals and as a collective.
Exactly.
So yeah, where shall we start on that?
Yeah, well, probably if we want to be able to understand this turning time, or the turning point within, we need to know shortly on what it's based and how it's calculated. And so let's begin with the so-called year 0, the birth of Christ, the start of our calculation of time, which underwent several steps of development to the Gregorian calendar, through different sources, several corrections, and the introduction of the leap year. There is a 6-year deviation. So consequently, now in our year 2018 would accordingly be the real 2012, which many prophecies refer to. And we remember, Julian, this mess and hype that was in 2012, when so many people thought that based on the Mayan calendar that the world will end, and that the world will be also destroyed, or there were so weird theories. But as we see, we are sitting here and talking about these wonderful topics. So to continue here, most of the people, that's why they heard about the Mayan calendar. And I worked with different shamans from the different indigenous tribes of the Incas, the Olmecs, the Toltecs, the Mayas, and they were quite upset about all these misinformations that we done in the Western world, because for them was always clear that when one circle's end, a new is beginning, and there will be no end of the world. But the interesting thing,
an end of the world as we know it, maybe, right? An end of the separation that I think has destroyed so many lifetimes and into suffering. And so there's a beginning of a new circle, is what you're saying.
exactly. And interesting is also that even if most of the people just know the Mayan calendar, when we have also the Veda calendar with the yugas, we have the pyramid calendar and the astrology calendar with the zodiacs, and all the four have an outer circle of 26,000 years. And this, now we jump into science, this is based on a cycle of 26,000 years, the so-called galactic conjunction, which means that our solar system that we are living is circling one time around the central sun on Alcyone in the Pleiades in our galaxy. So it's one turnaround from our solar system inside our galaxy. And so the interesting thing is, hey, we have 4 cycle calendars from 4 different time periods, 4 different continents, 4 different cultures, and they all say the same. We have the 26,000 year circle based on this turnaround, and always when they end and they restart, there is like a space, a time window of 70 years. And within this time of turning, there is like a turning point of 7 years. And now we are exactly living in this period between 2017 and 2024. That's what we call like the turning point.
It's very exciting because this is literally our now, the world we live in, the world you're listening to this episode, out there, the world inside of our own consciousness is really wanting us to be part of this shift, right? It's really wanting us to participate in what is shifting. And these shifts, as complex the words might sound, I believe, Rico, the beauty is that it's really a very simple shift, a shift back to wholesomeness, a way of living that allows us to be actually more human based on values that we're all craving: connectivity, empathy, to love being embodied as a human being. So thank you for kind of explaining and expressing these times of shift.
Yes.
What's the path forward then from where we are in this very moment?
And just to give a note on what you said, that we are living now in this time, isn't this wonderful? What a possibility, what a chance, what a lot of possibilities that we can choose now if we want, and we can give our energy and our resonance within this.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think on an larger than life kind of perspective, this is why everyone who's on this planet right now came here in this time.
Exactly.
Experience this kind of shift.
We talked in the last years a lot between different people all over the world, how we can share this knowledge, because most of us are like me, over 50. We studied our whole life and researched about, and took a lot of time and had to read hundreds of books to get the right 10 ones. And so finally, after writing the trilogy of Living Legacies, which you mentioned in the beginning, because the Giza legacy gives the overall view about where do we come from, the Day legacy about who we are, and the Gaia legacy about where we can go. But all the 3 together are nearly 1,800 pages. And as we both know, not all the people are still reading books or ebooks. They are more using the mobile or the pads or the computer. And so the idea was to bring it like into a short essence about 30 pages, even with nice pictures, 30 pages, brought in 7 steps that are easy understandable, that give a short overview and show out how we can reach this by our own, because we don't need no masters or gurus or teachers. We can share our wisdom and everybody can try it out. And so he will see or feel very fast and soon if this is, these steps are working. So that's also a big wish for these 7 steps, that people just try them out and get their own experience, and that they just need this information, but the rest they can do from their own potential and consciousness. And that's the best experience we can do, and not following experiences from masters or gurus or whatever we call them.
I love that you're saying this. And I think this is really part of this shift, is for everyone listening, for everyone who you're sharing this episode with, you're sharing this information with, is we're beyond the time of creating icons, masters, gurus, as you said, Rico, right? Where we look at these people and we make them our gods. It's quite the opposite. The master in this new age is the collective, is all of us in our individual journey of becoming and in the shared journey of becoming. So yeah, I think try it out and ask those questions on your insight practice in your moments of stillness, and see how you can kind of create your own reality with the knowledge that's being shared here today.
Exactly, because the only true help is to give the people the information or the help for self-helping, so that a good teacher is just who makes the others as soon as possible going their own way without needing him anymore. So these are good teachers for me.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so maybe we give a look into the 7 steps.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let's first just mention them as an overview. So the first one is recognize your history. The second, unfold your divine potential. The third, experience love as the key. The fourth, understand the game of souls. The fifth, realize your potential. The sixth, act out of the old new knowledge. And the seventh, create your new reality, and especially your own real reality.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear more of depth to each of those points, because I think this is being shared so often, create your own reality, but without the proper questioning of well, where do we come from, and like how do we actually experience love as the key, and what does it mean? I think it's quite easy to get lost in this process of creating one's own world, because the game of souls is certainly something that is very alive and involves all of us.
Mm-hmm. And that's also why it is the 7th step, because if we don't have a certain basic information about the other fields, it's very difficult to create our reality, because if we are just having a short or a very small view of what's really going on, we are creating our reality just like in a small box. But we have to expand our box and to see really all the realms that we are passing through with these 3 main questions. And if we have this view, then we are able to create a complete, a holistic reality. So that's why it's the 7th step. The final one, finally.
Absolutely, creating one's own reality. So let's start with step number 1, recognizing our history. We spoke about it briefly already. And what else do you think is exciting to share at this point?
Yeah, maybe also as a shortcut, as we all know, officially our history starts around 3000 BC with the so-called high cultures of the Sumerian, the Babylonian, the Egyptian, the Pharaonic dynasties. In these time frames are also put the Maya, the Inca, the Chinese dynasties, the Indian empires, all of them flourish within this time frame. But the first signs that we have from culture are around 30 to 40 years old. And so there already start the questions where our forefathers and teachers got their information, even if when we see what they were able to do with buildings around the world, structures that we still today cannot understand what they mean or who built them. And so the best example for this is finally Giza in Egypt, where we know are the 3 megalithic pyramids, the Sphinx, and in the underground complex we see the steps of the 2 high cultures before. One is the Atlantean period and one the Lemurian period. And all them in their old writings, even what we found in Egypt with the Palermo stone or the Turin papyrus, they all start around 40,000 BC, and not like hunters and gatherers like we were taught in school. So officially before 3000 BC were just hunters and gatherers, but they were really high cultures with high consciousness, and they left us the structures that we see in Giza or in the Stone Age or on the Eastern Islands with the Maui or in Pumapunku in Bolivia or Tiwanaku. So all these structures with enormous stone blocks up to 1,200 tons in red granite, they are kind of similar, and that's what I documented also in the book Gaia Legacy, that all these main power places and structures are based on the ley line waves and the crossing points of them around the world. So even our history on Earth goes really a long time beyond what we are teach today in school. And what's also interesting is that all these cultures and the 4 great world religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and also all the North American tribes, the Toltec, Olmecs that I mentioned, the Kahunas in Hawaii, or the Dogon and the Biviti in Africa, the Maori in New Zealand, and many others, all they say the same, that our ancestors came from the spiritual worlds or the different stars. So our history, as I know from own experience, is not starting on planet Earth, but a long time ago in other realms of the material and before even in the spiritual worlds. So that's what's meant with recognize our history, to not see just from our Earth culture or history, but in a also here much bigger and wider frame.
Yeah, that is certainly and a whole other topic of exploration that we could dive in for hours and hours, but also to kind of stay within those 7 steps. So I think it's highly important to check into this and to ask ourselves, like, what is our history and how are these power structures from other cultures, how were they built, and etc. But also, like, to at the very least start questioning the current writing of history that is kind of keeping us somewhat trapped in this linear way of thinking. So when you talk about step 2 in unfolding our divine potential, what are the key points that you think are truly important to understand our body, our mind, and our soul?
I think the main insight here is the human divine matrix. Also in the Old Testament, which is the same from the 3 Abrahamistic religions, the the Judaism, the Christianity, and Islam, it says God created man in his image. So this is one of the few sentences which I still agree. And finally, this matrix is built, we talked a little before, by body, spirit, and soul, by ego, mind, and feelings. And this is forming with the higher and lower consciousness, the so-called Merkaba in us, like a light vehicle. And this is surrounded by an energy sphere, which is also protecting us. And also inside, we have the tree of life, our 5 bodies, and the 7 chakra and nerve centers. So this is like together the human divine matrix. And to really use this potential, we should be conscious about. So it's very nice to get an idea what is slumbering in us and what we're wearing around, often not in a conscious way, and to recognize what an enormous potential this allows us if we are aware of it and start to use it.
It's like what we're looking for is not really our outside body, but really truly our internal energetic divine matrix.
Exactly. And within all this, it's what we mentioned before, the divine spark, the eternal soul, and the free will. So these 3 are like moving this wonderful vehicle that we are, that we all have.
Very powerful knowledge. So when we understand where we come from and we understand the divinity within us, or we at least inquire to start asking those questions, I know that step 3 is experiencing love as the key. Do you want to maybe say what love is first, and what love really, what it really means?
Yeah, what an enormous question.
Yeah.
And it's so much, because finally love is the magical connection and truly the key to everything that is. And the love has also like kind of magic or unearthly power, because it's the characteristic that the more love you give, the more flows to you back. But there are so many different aspects of love. And that's what I try also to enlighten a little bit in this third step. So also to give a short overview, we start with the divine love, that is like the essence, because everything is developed and originated from the deity finally. It is pure love and light, and it dwells eternally and tangible for each of its soul beings in every one of us. So the second is like the love for the deity, because it appears in our souls from the knowledge that we are childs of the deity. And if we awaken this love, it really fulfills our souls, because we are like reconnected. And it's so a little step, but it can really change your life. And then it's like the love for everything that is, or the all oneness, or the love for all, because this is like it compromises all the aspects of creation that we love, the other beings, the animals, the plants, the landscape, Mother Earth, all the beautiful universe that surrounds us, that we recognize and not running through it in our cities and forgetting what is really surrounding us.
Yeah, I think this is more important than ever. I think when I read your material, there's a beautiful Mahatma Gandhi quote that you and me are one, and I can't hurt you without hurting myself. And if we think of each other, I think that's a great place to start. But then when we expand that, as you just said, Rico, to the earth and the nature that we are born out of and we're born into, I think there is we can't replace nature with technology. We at some point, I think everybody will have to acknowledge that technology is beautiful and has a lot of amazing capacities in itself, but nature is our mother, right? Nature is who kind of gave us these bodies as well. So we can't hurt nature without actually hurting ourselves.
And we cannot eat technique or drink or breathe. So even if we are living in very technical way, our surrounding is what really allows us still to live our life. So yes, it's very urgent to be aware. And the next is like the neighborly love, which has like two aspects, because as we know, it's easy to love our lovers or families or friends or the colleagues we like. But however, if it is difficult to love people who we find unlikable or who works against us. And for me, the best or the correct attitude towards them is a very great statement by Fyodor Dostoevsky, which said, to love someone means to see him as the deity intended him. So that we accept that we are all individuals, they are not two the same. Everybody is on his own way of experience with all different consciousness, and this makes it sometimes difficult, but if we really recognize it, we turn into deep respect, and it's not anymore difficult to accept other thinkings or points of views, because we can always find like the points that are connecting us. And so this leads also to the next with the love for our enemies, which is kind of the most amazing and most difficult thing that Buddha and Jesus explained us in Jesus, especially in his New Testament of love. And yet it is just the only possibility to make peace with ourselves or with our so-called enemies by transforming negative energies like enmity or hatred into forgiveness and love by means of insights and understanding. Because when I never try to see from the point of view of my enemies, I will never find a solution. So the three forms or aspects of love that we mentioned before are allowing also this incredible love for enemies.
I find it very interesting. One of the previous episodes with Terence Patton, we talked a lot about the integral heart and the integral philosophy really of seeing everything as part of life. So truly, when we look at quote unquote our enemies, we're looking at another part of our internal psyche. We're looking at another part of ourselves. So when we forgive, when we love, when we stretch ourselves to at least accept and acknowledge, I think it's a huge piece of freedom, a huge puzzle piece to freedom, is to love and choose forgiveness,
Exactly.
which I think all of us have to work on. And at the same time, it comes naturally to us when we start to inquire into that direction.
And another aspect is like the love for our family. That is like the kind of love that we are born into, and usually all children at first love their mother, fathers, and siblings, but all too is sometimes changes, as we know. For instance, the child does not get enough love and attention, and all the family stories are often difficult and challenging. But for me, it was also my experience when my two daughters were born. I really felt the first time complete unconditional love without expecting nothing. So they teach me this pure way of love, let's say.
Unconditional love. That's a powerful concept that I think really needs to be put into practice. All these things that we're sharing in this episode, and Rico, thank you for really going deep into especially the topic of love, are so much more than just intellectual concepts of our mind. They're practices to be lived, to be at least aspired to live, practices every day in every way.
Exactly. And so the next aspect that we look a little inside is the love for our partners, which is perhaps the most moving and at the same time the most versatile kind of love. It mostly begins with a superficial kind of beginning in love and can then lead to a deep love or oneness, into a harmonious interplay of like also giving and taking. And however it is also very challenging and bears a lot of conflicts and dependencies, which are often part of a development process. So the social conventions also play a big part in this time, how our picture of men and women are, if they are based on the patriarchy or the matriarchy, and how our culture and religions are teaching this is a very hard way still today, because the most urgent thing for me inside the love for the partner is not just in the partnership, but really that we bring the female aspect and the female right and view back in its full potential, and balancing, because as we all know, all men have also female aspects and all women have also male aspect, so that we can really go cross over this line of this old war between the female and the male, and bring it back also in a new conscious harmony.
Yeah, I think that's very, very powerfully said. I think it all comes also really truly back to loving oneself, right? Like to finding this love first and foremost in the depth of our soul, in the depth of who we came to be, and accepting ourselves the way we are before we can even stretch it to, let's say, our partner or our enemies or anyone else. Really, I mean, this is a very famous quote. If you don't love yourself, you cannot really generate love for others.
Yes, you're so right, and that's why we're ending you now also with these considerations with the self-love, and which do not mean the narcissistic love according to the motto like I am the most beautiful, I am the best. We mean that we love ourselves and accept ourselves the way we are at the moment, with all our strengths and weaknesses, and that we handle ourselves lovingly. As it also said correctly, like you mentioned before, those who do not love themselves can hardly love others. So this love for ourselves also contains the love for our soul, our higher self, and not only the love for our, let's say, human side. Either we love our ego and follow its desires and the wishes of our lower self, or we love and desire also the fulfillment of our soul and try to do everything that serves our real own purpose.
That's very interesting. So in order to understand that love for our soul, let's understand the game of souls, because this is a topic that I think is very, very little actually spoken about. The role soul plays maybe is more spoken about, but what is the game of souls?
Yes, and this has also different levels, and we can deepen also a little, because for this we have to start like in also higher realms, because also here we get to go out of our box and not see just our direct environment or the world. We have to see really the whole creation, because as we mentioned before, we are like light beings from the loving divine creation, and spiritual sources speak about myriads of souls who are on their individual way through space and time in the spiritual and material worlds. So therefore, maybe let's first have a short description about these worlds, because the spiritual world consists of 12, let's say, dimensions or levels. And everything in them is like subtle, luminous, loving, harmonious, and so on. And the deity created these worlds of light from the 4 aspects. And so the cosmos developed, and later the material levels. So the universe of the worlds of the dimensions within the cosmos, since nothing is out of it. So inside of this were created the material worlds, and this material universe is like a reflection of the spiritual worlds with the 12 dimensions. And astronomy and quantum physics have also confirmed that the expanding universe exists like in a hyperspace. And this hyperspace we call the spiritual worlds. And as we know, just in our material worlds, there are innumerable galaxies and solar systems or star systems. And each star around which planet circle is a sun, of which just in our galaxy, there are several 100 million which are turning around the central sun in the constellation of the Pleiades that we mentioned before. This is 26,000 years circle. And in our solar system, we have the 8 planets which turn around the sun in spiral. But in our solar system, just Mother Earth is showing the earthly senses with the 5 realms of creation, like the mineral, the plant, the animal, human, and the ether realms. And so we have to have this picture to really understand or have a point of view about this incredible game of the souls, because they are also interacting between different worlds or dimensions. If we are in a certain consciousness, again on Earth, it's absolutely normal to have also conversation and contacts with other souls in other realms. And so some of all these beings never left the spiritual worlds. Another part went to the material worlds after the separation, and others are moving like from one realm into the others. And this is all like the base of all the beings that we meet every day, and in our private time or in the office or in our jobs. And there is a ongoing interplay finally of all these beings for getting respect. And it's often a fight for recognition, for power, a fight for love also. And nobody will get along with everybody in this game of souls, and perceive some people, like we mentioned, as enemies. But exactly therefore you need this consciousness of our matrix and of love as the key, and you use it, because this way it's very easy to find solution, and otherwise conflicts instead of harmony is always programmed and inevitable.
Yeah, so it almost seems like we've been going through those cycles of conflict over harmony over and over and over again. And even in my own life, I think I used to be shocked and devastated about things that gone, let's say, wrong, or that went in a way that I wasn't certain about. But over time, I think we can recognize that after every low point, there is another high point, and after every tear, there's laughter, and you know. So I think there's so much interplay that when we kind of step out of the drama about it, it turns into like a clarity that we don't have to have have power over us, but really surrender into this uncertainty of the game of souls, as you call it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so 4 steps are like leading into the step 5, like to realize our potential. And this is based on the time of turning that we mentioned in the beginning, because in this time our possibilities are even much bigger than in all the other times. So let's say we can do quantum jumps in short time, or we can fall completely back to zero. And it's all about which way we choose for ourselves.
Interesting. So what is it that enables this power to do those quantum jumps, to really truly realize that potential?
It's about certain vibration, how to say, like the divine light beings and hierarchy are increasing since the 70s, the vibration in all the 12 dimensions, and the turning point we live in now. And stimulates and strengthens the turn of the cycle and the change of consciousness. So this will get you into like a cosmic resonance, a unity with the divine creation, we can say, which can be reached much more easily in this time of turning. And it supports us to have insights and leads to the love consciousness. Some call it the Christ consciousness. For me, it's better explained as the love consciousness, because you have not to be Christ to get in this consciousness. I know a lot of wonderful souls that I met that are from all the different religions, or they don't even follow a religion and still living in nature, and they are completely in this love consciousness. And so in this consciousness awakened soul will thus be elevated into this state of being in the next level. So that is the big point, that if we reach this finally mass consciousness that we will talk a little later about, it's possible as a quantum jump, really, that we will be elevated from the third to the fifth dimension, which all the possibility and potential that are evolving then within us. So it's really a wonderful opportunity that we have now. So let's use it.
Well, yeah, let's use it. Would you say, in other words, that in order to really use this potential, it's also about using our free will, as we said earlier, wisely, to not fall for the potential of the ego or the desires of the ego, but to truly kind of, well, beyond just surrendering to the flow, being one with the flow of the divine energy that is kind of unfolding on the planet?
Exactly. So this is like, the one is, let's say, the flow or the process in ourselves, and the one is the process that surrounds us in this time of turning. And if we align both, this will bring us in the full possibilities of this time of turning.
Very interesting. So that leads us step by step kind of through those steps into step 6, which is, very curiously, you're basically really saying act out of the old new knowledge. So the clarity is that when we tune into knowledge like this, we recognize that we're not making it up, we're not inventing it, we're not coming up with something new here. We're actually tuning in to the deep resonance of our soul that is basically an old knowledge of knowing who we are. Like this ancient quote, "Know thyself," really comes to mind for me there.
Exactly. And it's also the one thing is to know, the other to act. And I use a statement by Archangel Gabriel that you find also in the beginning of the 6th step, which says, when you come back home, it is not about what you thought, but all about what you have done. So therefore, really now, acting is really important. for what use are all the answers and knowledge and insights for us, if we do not act accordingly in this experience and thus also experience them? So it's not simply about the blind belief, it's the contrary. It's really about examining ourselves, and this is only possible if we are ready to go the way of our own experience. So therefore should, I hope, serve these 7 steps to encourage, to empower, to really make joy to try it out, for all the ones that not have already started, because just so we will discover ourselves, and our own experience can arise really from the belief. And so, like we mentioned before, practically all what's here brought together, it's like also old knowledge, because it's about that we are a being from the deity, that we are created from the same matrix, that we are a light being on our way through space and time, that we are coming from the spiritual worlds, and that we can go back there where we like to. And for this, it's urgent to come like in this way to ourselves, in the attitude, I am who I am. I'm not following someone else. I make my own experiences and decisions. The spiritual wording for this is Eya Asher Eya. I am who I am. And this is about the transformation, the resurrection, finally, of the soul within ourselves, so that we are turning our own soul by pausing for a moment and feeling what is really important for us, and the knowledge of the deity and the knowledge of ourself, that we are related, eternally connected, and nothing can divide us finally if we don't allow it. So that we are conscious about ourselves as really as a light being. And this means also like a self-responsibility for our thoughts and words and actions, by being conscious of ourselves. And this serves deeply the so often mentioned self-realization, which requires that we know what we want and have to do as human beings, not just professionally, but also spiritually and from our soul. And this way, we really practice a life in unity with ourselves, and this leads to unity and the all oneness with the others, like a life in dedication with love, joy, and helpfulness. And this is much more fun and much more fulfilling than running about consuming everything what's appearing new on the market. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really what it is about, is to encourage and empower this individual expression of our divine nature, right?
Yeah, exactly. It sounds a little tricky, but finally, if we get this together, it's an easy way. It's not needed much. Everybody is able to go this way and to start to really live his own life. And so this follows also by the end of the step on the so-called elevation. And as we know, there are 2. The one is like the individual elevation that is always possible if you reach a certain consciousness. And the other is the ascensions of the souls, and it's so nice, called the elevation of creation of the material worlds. And this is like we call the collective elevation. And this is just possible each 26,000 years. Now, loved ones, now it is possible that we reach this together.
Like a collective ascension, elevation in that sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love those steps, because I think they kind of summarize exactly what you just shared, Rico. It is a lot simpler maybe than we sometimes think things are. So to kind of navigate us all the way to creating our own reality. What is really in this last step? We mentioned earlier, there's a reason why it's not just the first step, because it is essential to kind of understand certain principles. It is essential to follow certain ways of purifying the spirit, or purifying the way of letting the oneness with spirit come through. So what is truly in step 7, creating one's own reality?
Maybe just let me shortly end with a note, the 6th step with the collective ascension that we talked about is
sure.
really aligned and goes hand in hand with the so-called critical mass, or the mass consciousness. So if a certain number of humans are like we say, like awakening their full potential, this consciousness flows over into the mass consciousness, and from one moment to the other, all humans have access or have this consciousness. So when we are going this way, we are not just serving ourselves, we really serve humanity at the same time, because every one of us could be the one soul that makes a difference for the mass consciousness. So this is also a good purpose, how we can really good serve ourselves and serve humanity at the same time.
Yeah, powerful. This is very powerful, because no matter who we are, no matter who you are listening to this, no matter, again, who you share this episode with, there is such a merit in letting each and every individual come out and come out and awaken into this mass elevation.
And each one is so wonderful in his way, so unique. And a lot of New Age and esoteric stuff says that we first have to learn so much and go so far before we can change something. But this, from my point of view, is not right. It starts in the second when you decide to do it. So it's like one step from one room into another, and this can go very fast if we decide this way. And this is also, finally, on all this is based the 7th step, that we, with this consciousness and knowledge, which is resumed in 30 pages, we have this overview, and now based on this we can create our new earthly and spiritual reality, and define in a new way as what we see ourselves. So finally, it's the way how we see ourselves. If we see us just as a being that is just a part of the system and change nothing, or if we see us as a being with an enormous potential that can create and manifest everything what it really wants. And so every one of us has really his special story, is on the way through his adventures. And finally, the reflection first to create our reality is to go into reflection of some parts of our own life. It's like to learn us recognize now from another point of view, so that we take some time to understand this short overview and what it means for our life, and that we will come to an inner quietness to look eternally, like the quantum physics called the observer on our life, and that we reflect once easy things like, how did I live so far, and how did I feel about it? What gave me joy and fulfillment, or what brought me sadness and unhappiness? What have I reached so far, and what do I really want to reach? What is my calling, and what is my daily work? Are they aligned? what would I like to do in the future? What are my interests? Where do I feel resonance? Or mainly also, what are my wishes and goals as a holistic person, and not reduce ourselves in a small box thinking, oh, this is not reachable for me, but really to follow our needs and wishes, because all them are manifestable, all this we can reach. And for this, finally, we use the alchemy in ourselves. So it's about the enormous power that our finally our brain and our heart have. And for this, it's also very interesting to get some insights from the new science for the quantum physics, because it also says that we finally, by this space field and morphogenetic field around us, and in which we are moving, that we create completely our own reality by our mind and our heart and feelings. And also the new science of epigenetics by the microbiology, which is based on DNA and our genes, coming to the same conclusion that we are finally forming from the microcosmos in ourselves by mind and feelings our human body and also our health. And the third is the so-called science of the heart, or of the heart math, which scientifically proven that the electromagnetic field of the heart is up to 100 times stronger than the one of the brain. So the magnetic field is even 5,000 times stronger than the field of the brain. And so if we align the knowledge and the wish of the brain with the power and the feeling of the heart, this is the base how we can visualize and manifest our new realities. And it sounds now very easy, and finally it is, but everybody really should try this out to bring this in alignment, and all will be very excited. So positive thinking alone, it's not enough. It really needs this much stronger energy of the heart and the feeling of the love to create and co-create. And all these three new sciences are confirming this completely.
I love how that also brings us back to where you started in this episode, Rico, which is taking moments of stillness and taking moments of silence in our everyday, and multiple moments maybe, so that we actually have the space, the capacity to kind of get out of our minds, out of our thinking, into the heart space, into the gratitude, into the love space, and practice, right? I mean, all of this is a daily happening. This is not like a book that once you understood it in your mind intellectually, you got it and just go back to normal. This is a daily occurrence, a daily practice that goes for you, that goes for me, that goes for everyone who's tuned in.
Exactly. And this is also very urgent what you say, to bring it in our daily life. I remember in my early days, I reminded me every day, oh, I have to meditate. Yeah, I will do it on the weekend when I have time. Then I will take 2 or 3 hours and just meditate. Sometimes it happens, sometimes not. I was unhappy. And then an old wise man told me, you want to do 2 big steps. Start every day with 15 minutes and put 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the noon, 5 minutes in the evening, and there will be no excuse to not give you these 5 minutes. And just go in a quiet space, take some deep breaths, feel your body, feel your heart beating, feel your blood pulsing, feel your different bodies, feel your feelings that you have, and bring your mind and your thinking on a certain topic that you decide each time what is showing up in yourself, what is urgent. So this is kind of a meditation, pray, affirmation, and it takes just 3 times 5 minutes every day. And I started this, and it worked immediately, and I probably could not live anymore without it. And now they are still bigger. 5 minutes is not enough for me, but I'm still using these 3, I call them islands in my daily life.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think this is a very great kind of, tip in a way, but also it's a great anecdote for how simple it is in all of our lives. It's very, very similar to how I practice as well. I mean, on ideal days, my morning practice is a little longer because I enjoy having the space in the morning to just really remember all of this, truly feel it in my heart before I go out and get things done, as we say. But these islands in a day, I think, are very much achievable for whoever is listening. 5 minutes, 3 times a day. Create this island of allowing yourself to feel, allowing yourself to be, and allow yourself to remember what is really truly important. And then go out and touch all the physical, material things in your life the way you want to. Rico, as we're kind of coming to the end of this this conversation, is there anything else you want to share based on your your very powerful life's work?
I think the purest I can share for this moment and this special time of turning are these 7 steps. So I hope we touched some hearts and minds, and that people are going on the website because you can download it for free.
Yeah, I will make sure to put a link to that PDF, so people can also read and kind of dive even a level deeper. It's incredible what you've put together in just like 20-ish pages, the depth of it.
Thank you.
Rico, there is one more question, and I told you I'm going to ask you this, which is very, very simply put in your own words. If we as humanity have a vision for humanity, and you talked a lot about vision and legacy and understanding, but what's your hope? What's your dream? What do you see as possible in beyond this window of the next 7 years of us kind of allowing more love and more empathy to come onto this planet? But what is possible for the next 50, 100, 200 years for humanity and Earth?
If we reach this mass consciousness, nearly everything is possible. And I have like my personal vision, and I have the vision I share also on the website, because it's finally the vision for the 7 steps, how I was also taught by the Elohim. And probably if not everybody knows, the Elohim are one of the 7 deity races. Many know also the cherubim or the seraphim. There are 7, and the Elohim is like the deity race of the humans. And so if you allow me, Julian, I just read the vision that it's based on the 7 steps, because it brings together in the best way the vision what we can reach together. So it's about that we recognize ourselves as divine beings of light. In this way, the divine creativity is acting through us again, as the consciousness flows through our souls into the world. And in respect, we unite among all races and religions and overcome them in a new spirituality. As the great brother and sisterhood, we are freed from greed and striving for power. Together, we take responsibility for Mother Earth, and justly we share the gifts and gods of the divine creation. Guided by the new consciousness, we are living in peace and joy.
Wonderful. This is really what it's about, being in the peace and the joy of being alive. Thank you, Rico, for taking the time, for sharing so abundantly about these insights and these 7 steps. It was a pleasure to have you on the show and a pleasure to be in this conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And like you, I serve and I try to spread informations that are serving our brothers and sisters to get their own way and just to be inspired and enlightened and go joyful this path, even if the times are now quite hard, as much more it gives us and makes us much happier if we go with this consciousness.
Oh, absolutely. Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast. And if so, make sure to hit like or share the episode with someone you love. Wherever you are in the world today, have yourself a stellar day.